I ran down the hallway of the mental hospital screaming, "You can't keep me here! I have rights! You can't keep me here!" The windows were covered in metal fencing, and other mental patients were laughing at me, and I knew I was trapped. I thought I was getting out that day, but my ex-husband was in the office with this lady, and I was ready to check out. And she informed me that I had to stay because another patient had ratted me out saying that I was talking about suicide or something. So I thought that I was getting out, but I wasn't. And she said, if you resist, you'll be handcuffed and forced to stay by the police. And I was devastated. I was forced to stay against my will. But that's another story. That's coming up later on. This is only part one of my life story. And the things I'm going to share in this episode, which is called The Burning Toys, are going to make sense a little later on as I share this life story. And I want to explain everything, why did I end up in the mental hospital? Why have I tried to kill myself? Why am I a drag queen? All of this really does make a lot of sense once you go back to the very beginning. The beginning meaning my childhood. I'm recording my life story for many reasons. Reason number one is I just want to document my life. I've wanted to write a book. And if ever I do write a book, it's going to be called Put on a Brave Face. A friend gave me that book title, but I don't know if I'm famous enough to write a book or if anybody would read it. But I do know that I have a loyal, wonderful following. And I'm doing this for you. I went through my Facebook comments today on my last post, and I just was given so much love from all of you who follow me and who've shared this crazy Lady MAGA journey. And I've been really open with you, so you do know me. I don't know each of you individually, but I know that my story, my struggles from alcoholism to getting fired from my career in the airline industry, you've been there and you've seen it. So I want to share this story for you because I know you love me and I know you care about me. And I want to just document all of this because I have this irrational fear that I'm going to die or that I'm going to be killed or something. I'm sure it's irrational, but I just want to have this documented and share these stories because I know these stories can help others. And I also just want to feel validated in sharing my story. And of course, I'm just going to admit it. I want attention. Everybody wants attention. Everybody loves attention. I just admit it. From Jordan Peterson doing his podcast to Brittany to Paris Hilton, anybody out there, when you share your life story, part of it is because you want attention and you want validation. And of course, I'm only human. So I do want to be noticed. I want this story to be meaningful to other people. And of course, when we share our story, we are validated in a certain way. So for those of you who listen to this, beginning to end, I want to thank you for listening to this. And hopefully my story is going to resonate with you. And I do know that by sharing these stories of my childhood and my life story, that I will help people because so many of you have messaged me and said that me being open and honest has really helped you in many ways. Many of you who have, gay family members or gay kids or anything like that, it's been an honor to know that I've impacted your life. So here we go. I'm going to share my life story starting with my earliest memories and my childhood. And a lot of these stories are going to be really, really ugly. So I guess trigger warning. I hate the term triggered, but I will tell you that some of the things I'm going to share are definitely disturbing, and it's going to be difficult for me to share them. But like I said, it's therapeutic to share your story, to know that others will listen to it, and hopefully I'll feel better understood by myself and by others by getting this down in a linear fashion, starting with my earliest memories. As I go forward, I am going to be vague about a lot of things. I'm going to be vague about dates and places and names. Sometimes I'll just change names. And the reason is because I want to protect not only my privacy. I'm lucky I have not yet been doxxed. No one has invaded my home or my privacy, and I like to hold on to whatever anonymity I can. So I will be vague on certain things in this podcast, and I also will be changing some names out of respect for family members I'm going to talk about. So let's just begin by talking about why would someone share their childhood traumas with others. I think that therapy nowadays is toxic because it's all about rehashing your childhood traumas, blaming your parents, and regurgitating pain of the past over and over and over. I hate that. I like Elizabeth Smart because she went through terrible traumas, but she has chosen to move on and not let those traumas define her. So my goal here is not to rehash my traumas or rehash the bad things that happened to me in order to keep it alive or to process it. I have processed it. I don't live in the past in these experiences. But this is just part one, sharing my childhood experiences. And then as these episodes go on, I'm hoping that, you'll see the triumph, you'll see the growth, and you'll see the personal development that came from overcoming all the things that I'm going to share with you. I'm also going to share happy stuff as well. But let's begin by telling you a little bit about where I come from, like who I am, my blood. I did Ancestry DNA, and the number one pool of blood or whatever it is, where your blood comes from, is Mormon pioneers. My ancestors came from Denmark to the United States, to Utah, to Ogden specifically, to practice their faith and to join other Mormons in what they call Zion. And so my very blood is Scandinavian Mormon blood. And obviously, Mormonism is going to be a huge part of my story, good and bad. Honestly, mostly good. I can't stand people who leave the Mormon church and then blame the Mormon church for all of their traumas. I benefited from being Mormon more than I was hurt by being Mormon. So my grandfather was Danish, and that Mormon pioneer Scandinavian blood is one side. My mother's side of the family was the Irish, English, and all that, but she was a San Francisco girl. So she was a California girl through and through, born in San Francisco. So my mother and father met when my mother was very young. She was about 14, I believe. And she was a beautiful, gorgeous, but mousy bookworm, very timid girl. And my father, a few years older than her, was a big man on campus. He was student body president. He was captain of the football team, of the basketball team, a star athlete. He was editor of the school newspaper. He was adored. He was good looking. He was charming, and he was a powerhouse in high school. So when he began dating my mom, she was a vulnerable, young, naive child, essentially. I would consider a 14-year-old girl a child. And my dad swept her off of her feet, and he convinced her to have sex. And she told me later that she didn't even know what she was doing the first time they were intimate together. Both of my parents are dead. My dad died in a horrific car accident, and my mom died. Actually, a car accident accelerated her death as well, but she died of a heart attack. And so they're both in heaven. But back to that original story, my dad, a very controlling and, as far as I'm concerned, a very manipulative teenager, began having sex with my mom. And by the time she was 15, she got pregnant. And I mean, I could do an entire episode about my parents and their story, but I wanted to share this part of it because it explains a lot about my parents and where I come from and how I ended up being the youngest of 8 children. So my mom was pregnant at age 15 and she had to leave high school. She was slut shamed by my grandmother and by others in the community. She joined the Mormon church and she had her baby, and my parents were married as young teenagers. And from age 15 to 27, my mother had 7 children. Can you imagine that? Age 27 years old, 7 children. My mother spent her life trying to compensate for her inner belief that she was a young slut. So she tried to be the perfect Mormon. She was married. She was beautiful. She was put together. She had 7 children. But up until my mother's dying day, if she talked about what happened to her at age 15 with that pregnancy, she would weep. She would cry in shame, knowing that her children and her grandchildren would know her vulnerable story. As far as I'm concerned, my mom was a child, and in no way, shape, or form did she deserve the slut shaming that she got and that she internalized. Mom in heaven, God bless you for having those 7 children up until age 27. So, like I said, I'm the youngest of 8 children, and I didn't come along until 8 years after the seventh child. So, all of them grew up in this tight knit 7 children, poor family. They lived in a tiny house and they were very poor and they always financially struggled. But by the time I came along in the early 80s, my father's business in construction and roofing had really taken off and they had moved into a really nice home. And so I was born into a completely different environment than any of my 7 siblings. My oldest brother is 20 years older than me. We never even lived under the same roof. And quite frankly, I don't know him that well, and he's more like an uncle figure in my life. So by the time I came along, the family dynamics were completely changed. My parents never had a good marriage, ever. My dad was emotionally abusive, he was physically abusive, and he tormented my mother their entire marriage. I know it takes two to tango, but I blame my father for my parents' marital troubles. So my mom wanted to have a baby at age 35, and she felt that having another baby would help unite the family. It would save her marriage. And later on in life, she said, I wanted one more baby just in case I ended up alone, because she knew my father was going to leave her. On a certain level, she knew this, and he did 10 years later after I was born. So let's just jump right in to little Ryan, and I'll tell you my story. I was born and taken home to a Disney nursery. My mother was a champion breastfeeder, so I was breastfed in a rocking chair in a Disney nursery. And Disney played a huge role in developing my psychological outlook on life, and we'll jump into that later in my story. My earliest memory is actually in a movie theater, sitting in the aisle of a movie theater. I think I was 2, and I had wandered out of another movie with my teenage siblings and ended up sitting in the aisle in the movie theater. And of course, there was panic, there was mayhem, I was missing. They were so scared that I was kidnapped. But I had wandered into another movie theater and I had just plopped down in the aisle and I was enjoying the movie. So that's my earliest memory. Because all of my siblings were so much older than me, the seventh child is 8 years older than me. I was born into a family of essentially mostly teenagers, and I had 4 sisters, And my teenage sisters adored me. I was spoiled rotten. I was the center of attention. I don't think my feet ever hit the ground. I was always, babied and carried and spoiled. And I learned from a very early age that I love to be the center of attention. I love the spotlight. I was the entertainment for the family. I knew the world revolved around me. And my sisters have told me that when I came along, it just was a whole new life within our family. Having this little baby in their lives and this little toddler in their lives really did unite our family and took so much turmoil and difficulty and made it happy. So I was born with a built in audience. And as a staged person, as a performer, as an artist, I think I was born that way, and I was conditioned from the time I could walk to be the center of attention and to put on a show and make people laugh. I think you're either the showbiz type, a stage kid type, a performing type, or you're not. And I definitely was. There are actually photos of me next to my sisters cheerleading at the basketball game, and I am down next to them, literally doing leaps. I'm probably 2.5, maybe 3, performing for the audience with my cheerleader sisters, just relishing in the attention and the joy of knowing that I was just owning that audience. So literally, I was born to perform. Don't know why, but those pictures are hilarious. And I learned from a very early age that I could make people smile and I could make people laugh. And I knew that I was cute. I was the most adorable little kid you ever saw. Just, blonde hair, cute, tan in the summer, just this little all-American kid. And I knew that people loved me. As I got older, I told my dad, I know I'm getting older. And he said, how do you know you're getting older? And I said, people at church don't smile at me anymore. So I was very aware of my audience at all times. As I said, I grew up Mormon, so church every Sunday, and our lives revolved around the Mormon culture and the Mormon world. And it was a very squeaky clean, awesome world. No alcohol, no cigarettes, no cursing, no R-rated movies. And I lived a very sheltered, very awesome childhood. That being said, my parents' relationship was an absolute nightmare. They were never happy together. And my father was kind of a monster. I remember as a kid him throwing a chair through the living room window, smashing the window, and the neighbor came over and peeked through the broken window and asked if everything was okay. I remember witnessing fist fights between my teenage brothers and my father. He once tipped over the entire dinner table, chasing my sister, who he was angry with. So we had this nice Mormon facade and everything kind of seemed really perfect from the outside, but our home was very tumultuous and it was difficult. So from an early age, I witnessed a lot of screaming, a lot of fighting, and a lot of turmoil. From the earliest stage of my life, I was completely different than my older 3 brothers. There are pictures of me in my sister's cheer skirts. There are pictures of me in a wig. I always was, I guess you could call it an effeminate little boy. My mom once told me that she knew I was different, and she figured it out when I was about 1.5, and we were outside in the yard, and I was with our little dog, and I was feeding the dog my sandwich. And she said, every time the dog's tongue would touch my hand, I would flail my arms in disgust, like, ew. And she said, I knew right then there was something extremely different about you. So as a gay man, I have to wonder, are we born this way? Is it conditioning? Is it, lack of a strong father? Is it sexual abuse? I really don't know. I was never sexually abused. I definitely had a rough and tumble father, but, millions of people have that and they're not gay. So I believe I was born this way. I believe there's something in people like me, gay people, and we're just born that way. We're just born different. We're born more emotional, more sensitive, more creative, more flamboyant. So that's my only explanation, is that I've always been different. Literally, everything about me is different. And I grew up in a family where that was discouraged, except by my sisters who kind of let me be who I wanted to be. But all of that changed around age 5. But let's go toward that time in my life. So when you talk about, when did you know you were gay? I never really thought about it, but in preschool, I had a little crush. Obviously, not a romantic crush or a sexual crush in any way, but I had a little friend and his name was Jacob. And I just loved Jacob. He had like wavy brown hair. I just remember the texture of his sweater. He had like this little like velvety sweater, and I loved to sit next to him. And I remember us playing and collecting snails in his backyard, and I just adored Jacob. And I don't think it was just friendship. I think there was a little heart-to-heart connection, puppy love or childhood love. I can't really explain it, but that's my earliest memory of something you could maybe call gay. Obviously, I was a preschooler, so you can't really, label that, but that is kind of my earliest memory. And then as life went on, I never had crushes on girls. I want to tell my story as chronologically as possible. So we talked about preschool. Now let's jump to kindergarten. The first time I was actually really in trouble for acting like a girl, there was a dress up collection, and of course, we got to play dress up, and I always wanted to be the girl. I always wanted to be the teenage girl. I idolized my teenage sisters. They were beautiful, they were cheerleaders, they were popular, they were student body officers, they were just everything. So I idolized my sisters. So I wanted to dress up and be the teenage girl in kindergarten when we played. But my teacher got me in so much trouble and shamed me and basically said, Ryan, you can't do that. And I don't blame her for that. I mean, it was a different time. And so there you have it, folks. I'm Lady MAGA USA today. If you're listening to this, you've heard of Lady MAGA USA, my drag persona. So was I born a drag queen? I have no idea, but I do know that I've always had an interest in feminine fashion and makeup and all of that, obviously, from the time I was this little kid in kindergarten. So I was always different. Let's jump ahead to first grade. I was president of the secret club. All my friends were girls, and I was president of the secret club. So we would bring things like lip gloss, or, by the way, let me put on my lip gloss as I tell this story. That's my little catchphrase for Lady MAGA. Let me put on my lip gloss. There. So we'd have like lip gloss or chapsticks, or like Avon chapsticks, or a little cologne that my mom got me from Avon, and we'd sit in a circle and we would share our secrets, and nobody could see our secrets. It was the secret club. So that's obviously a very girly thing to do. I remember the Avon lady coming over, and my mom would always order those delicious flavored lip balms. If you grew up in the 80s at all, you probably had an Avon lady, and you probably had the privilege and the pleasure of those delicious chapsticks, flavored lip balms. They were my world. My mom always kept a drawer for all the grandchildren, and they could always pick out one of those chapsticks. I do that to this day for my family. Speaking of grandchildren in our family, I have I think it's like 55 nieces and nephews. Yes, all of my siblings had tons of kids. So I think I have like 50 nieces and nephews, and then I don't even know, maybe 30 to 35 great nieces and nephews. I became an uncle at the age of 2. Like I told you, my oldest brother never lived under the same roof as me, and my first nephew was born just under 2 years after I was born. So I've been an uncle. And my nieces and nephews were more like siblings to me than my actual siblings because we were the same generation growing up together. And so I was an uncle at a very early age. I was incredibly jealous of my first nephew. I was obviously center stage, center of attention, youngest child, little stage kid in diapers. And then along came this first grandchild, this cute, adorable baby. He was blonde, he was cute, he was a little cherub or whatever that is. And everybody loved him. So I was very jealous of him, that my spotlight was being taken away. But I love my nieces and nephews. I grew up with them. Their peers, when I was younger, I used to force them to call me Uncle Ryan. No, you have to call me Uncle Ryan because I wanted to feel older, but I never was. We grew up together as kids. I remember Halloween when I was maybe 5 years old. I wanted to be a punk rocker, and my sister sprayed my hair with colored spray, and I remember she put eyeliner and black lipstick on me, and I was just on cloud nine with those cosmetics and the makeup and the hair and the like chain jewelry and all this stuff. I've always had a fascination with cosmetics. And some of my family members blame my sisters and they say that your sisters made you gay. No, I think there are millions upon millions of little brothers who were dressed up and makeup was put on them. It doesn't make you gay. So that is so stupid to believe that. I definitely don't believe that. So I loved dress up. Let me tell you, I was the star of the first grade play. It was Sleeping Beauty. Of course, I was the king, and my mom made this gorgeous king costume. It was red and gold, and she put like fake feather fur on the sleeves and on the crown, and I knew that I was just looking good, and I loved being in that first grade play. And every single year after that, I was in every single play and got lead roles, and I loved to perform. One of the hardest and first traumas of my childhood was watching my siblings leave the house. My sisters, when I was very young, they went off to college. And I remember they were my world. I was their spoiled little brother. And all of a sudden, my oldest sister left. And then my oldest brother left. I don't really know him either. He left. But my two sisters, who were everything to me, when they went to college, I remember standing in the doorway, realizing what was happening. And as they left, I ran down the street, heartbroken, screaming, realizing that they were gone. And so it was just a pattern of abandonment, I guess you could say, watching all of them leave. And then I had one brother and one sister at home. And by the time I was 9, they were gone as well. So I used to look at the family albums of all of them together growing up as those 7 children. And I was so envious of their Christmases and their birthday parties and their, trips to Lake Tahoe and all this stuff. And I basically was an only child, so I was very envious of that. I really idolized and loved my sisters so much. I think I could just relate to them more because my brothers were extremely macho. My father was actually an anti gay activist and the ultimate masculinity. I mean, football, sports, hunting, everything was so harsh and so unattractive to me as this little flamboyant theatrical type kid. So I related to my sisters and I loved them. When nobody was home, I would put on their cheerleading skirts or get in the closet and pull out the poof that went under their prom dresses and just look in the mirror and twirl in the mirror. Unfortunately, today they would tell a little boy doing those things that he's in the wrong body and that he is trans. And that's one of the reasons I speak out today as an adult gay man and a drag queen, because, children are being manipulated and mutilated, children just like I was. So that I'm grateful that I wasn't born today, because if I had woke parents today, they would drug me, mutilate me, and lie to me that I was in the wrong body. No, I wasn't in the wrong body. I just had an affinity for girl stuff. So now I'm going to jump in to something that happened when I was 5 years old that has marked me for life. I don't know if you can tell from my voice, but my heart has been pounding since I started recording this, and I just feel exceptionally nervous. But I'm going to share things that hopefully can help others and really kind of explain a lot of what I've been through. So when I was 5 years old, I was friends with the little boy across the street, and we would play together. His older sisters were super mean to me, but we'd play in the inflatable pool in the backyard, and we always had so much fun. But 5-year-olds, unsupervised 5-year-olds, being 5-year-olds, at some point we were inappropriate with one another. This is common among kids. They discover things, and so we were inappropriate, and we got in trouble for it, as we should have. I mean, you can't encourage that sort of a thing, but the way this was handled with me as a 5-year-old has marked my soul to this day. My mom and dad sat me. Now, keep in mind, I'm a 5-year-old baby. I haven't even lost a tooth yet. No concept, really, of right or wrong or what I had done or anything. And I was sat down at the dining room table, and my parents talked to me about what happened with my little friend and me. And the expression on their faces was one of like terror and shame and anger and darkness. And I just knew, sitting in that chair, that I had done something so bad and so evil that my parents couldn't even really look at me. Looking back, I know that there had always been a paranoia that I was homosexual, that little flamboyant Ryan twirling around was gay. And so my father, being an anti-gay activist, and our family being super Mormon, I think what happened when I was 5 with the neighbor kid was a trigger for them to sort of confirm their fears that Ryan might be that unspeakable evil thing. And I could just feel it in their faces. My mom said something to me that solidified my belief that I was evil. That was the end result of this experience, is that at age 5, I lost my innocence and I lost my sense of self. And I only believed that I was evil and bad. And my mom said, "You will forget this ever happened." And of course, by saying that, all she did was solidify it in my brain for the rest of my childhood and the rest of my life. And so I knew it was so bad that I couldn't even remember that it happened. I understand my parents' fears and I forgive them. But I just wish I could go back and find that 5-year-old little boy and say, uh-oh, Ryan, we shouldn't be doing things like that with your friends, and we're going to have a little talk about this, and that's not appropriate, and it's okay, but we're going to make sure we don't do that. And I would have just explained, like, we can't do those things, and just educate little me about what's appropriate and what boundaries are. And it would have been a good opportunity to talk about your body and, making sure that we're appropriate and that we do things that are appropriate. I mean, there's a million ways of handling that. And they handled it in the worst possible way. And it marked my brain and my soul and my spirit for the rest of my life to believe that I was evil. To this day, I still have a fear that I'm going to hell. And my haters who listen to this are going to say, oh, you're an internalized homophobe. Nyah, nyah, nyah. Maybe a little bit, but I don't really have internalized homophobia because I've come to the conclusion that gay is not bad. But I do have this deep-rooted fear of going to hell because I'm intrinsically evil and bad. Rationally, I know that's not the case. I can look at all of my good works in my life and, forgive my wrongs, but that marks you for life. It really does. So anybody listening to this, if you've got an effeminate little kid, please don't scar them for life by making them feel evil. And if you've got a kid who did something inappropriate with their friend at age 5, please don't mark them for life as so bad they can't even remember the mistake that they made. So after this happened, my family got fairly extreme with me. The reason I called this episode The Burning Toys is because of something that happened when I came home from first grade. I looked in the fireplace, and all of my fag toys were burning. So being a kid of the 80s, it was like Care Bears, Smurfs, ponies, other things like that. All of my most treasured possessions. My friends. When you're a little kid, those are your friends. They're real to you. You have an emotional connection to your toys. And my parents allowed my brother to burn my favorite toys in the fireplace because they were fag toys. I'll never forget that. And from that day on, I was only allowed to play with boy things. I was forbidden to go near any sort of fag toy or girl toy. If I got caught playing with dolls with my cousin, I would get in trouble. And so I had this collection of toys and boy things that I hated. I absolutely hated them. I never wanted to play with them. One of them was this stupid vibrating football game thing with like this metal thing, and it vibrated and the little like plastic football players would move around on there. And I hated it. I did not want to play with that. I did enjoy my little racetrack things, for like Hot Wheels. Those were kind of fun. But I never wanted to do sports. I was forced to do t-ball, and I hated it. I have a natural aversion to sports. I don't enjoy them. I don't understand them. I don't like it. So I was forced to play t-ball to make a man out of me. And I was always in trouble because there was one girl on my team. Of course, I gravitated toward her and I was friends with her. And I was always put in the outfield because I was just checked out. I didn't want to play. So what was I doing in the outfield? I was collecting dandelions, literally making little like bouquets and just in my own little world out there wishing the game would be over so we could have our ho-hos and Twinkies at the very end, which is the only thing I liked about it. So I was out collecting flowers, and I was in trouble for collecting flowers, and I was in trouble for talking to the girl, and then I wasn't allowed to talk to her. So who was this masculinity brigade? It was my dad and my brothers. And so they did things like they wanted me to play army because boys play army. They dug this huge pit, like a fort, in our backyard, probably like 4 feet deep. It was square shaped, and they put a big piece of wood over the top so that I would play army. It was a fort, and of course, I had toy guns and all this stuff that I hated. And so they made me this fort. The fort was kind of cool. It was fun to go down in there, and you know, every kid loves a fort, but I turned it into my playhouse. And so I dug holes in the walls and put like dishes in there and teacups. And once they learned that I was using it to play house, they filled it in. I remember going to church, and in the Mormon church, you have your scriptures. So you have the Bible and the Book of Mormon in a little like scripture case with a handle. So I remember being at church one time, and my dad told me to get out my Book of Mormon or something like that, and I said, I don't have it. And he said, what? And then he took my scripture case and opened it. And inside I had like chapstick and a pen and a mirror. And he said, this is not a purse. This is not a purse. He was so mad. But of course it was a purse to me. I didn't want the Bible and Book of Mormon in there. I wanted all my little knickknacks so that I could carry my fabulous little purse to church. So the masculinity brigade was always after me. That being said, my mom did not shame me or be cruel to me the way the others were. My mom came up with a little phrase, ALAG, Ryan, ALAG, acting like a girl, acting like a girl. And looking back, that was her way of protecting me from my dad, from my brothers, from bullies at school, and the world in general. So ALAG, acting like a girl. My mom knew eventually in school that the bullying was going to start because I was so flamboyant and I was just so freaking different than everybody else. So I made it through first grade. I remember my best friend, she was half black and half white, and I came home and I told my mom, Mom, I think she's an Indian. And then she explained to me that she was black. Beautiful little friendship. That friend, I mean, she grew up to be the most spectacular, gorgeous powerhouse of a woman. I just love her so much. So first grade was pretty cool. And then in second grade, that's when I really started to sort of get in trouble. I was always in trouble for talking. Talk, talk, talk. I never shut up. Talking to my neighbor. So my name was always on the chalkboard with one check. And then, of course, 2 checks was a big deal. And I would just put my head on my desk and cry because I could just not understand why I wasn't allowed to talk. And blah, blah, blah. So I started to get in trouble in second grade. As a kid, don't ask me why, but I had VHS copies of the movie Poltergeist, Carrie, and Jaws 2. Now, they were VHS copies, and my mom had like recorded them off TV or something, so they were not like the R-rated versions. But I watched Poltergeist over and over and Carrie over and over, but Jaws 2 marked me for life. I was obsessed with great white sharks, and it was about teenagers. So like I said, as a kid, I idolized teenagers because my older siblings were teenagers. So in second grade, I still have these things. I drew, like every story I drew or every picture I drew was a shark eating people. So my second grade teacher sort of mentioned to my mom that this is a little concerning that all Ryan draws is sharks eating people. So my psyche got a little darker in second grade, and I think the emotional turmoil was catching up from me. The turmoil of having fighting at home, having the fist fights at home, realizing I was different. So I sort of took a turn toward the dark side in second grade. A child who is raised in a turbulent home where parents are screaming at each other and people are fighting, and you're always afraid of your dad's belt because all he had to do was touch his belt, and then you knew you had to shut up or do whatever he needed you to do. So, kids who act out, like I started to at the end of second grade, um, it's a reflection of their home life. I remember my parents coming up the driveway. I was sitting inside and I could see them, and they were fighting and they were yelling. And my mom, in absolute desperation and misery, said, I just want to kill you. I just want to stab you in your sleep. And she was on the cusp of losing her mind. She said that. And I remember later saying, Mom, please don't kill Dad. Please don't kill Dad. And then shortly after that, my mom did lose her mind. Um, I remember she was on a bed in my sister's room, and she couldn't stop saying, I'm all right, I'm all right, I'm all right, I'm all right, I'm all right. She couldn't stop saying that. And I remember just looking at her and saying, Mom, stop saying that, stop saying that. And they called a church leader over. My mom was just laying there. She couldn't stop saying, I'm all right. And um, she had just reached her wit's end. And later on, she explained that in that moment, she almost crossed over into what she calls the gray place, the place of no return, like literally snapping and losing your mind. And inside, she had to pull herself back. And she was later told by a church therapist that um, my dad pushed her to the brink of insanity and he wanted her to be insane. And I really believe that. I think he wanted her to lose her mind. He never loved her, and I'll get into that later. But so that was the home life that I was living with. Um, so let's jump toward third grade when little Ryan went from cute little blonde all American sweetie to incessant troublemaker, acting out at every chance that I got. Um, in third grade, I was suspended from school because I deliberately clogged the urinals in the boys' bathroom. I was mean to my teacher. I was making fun of other students. And at that point, I had started to get bullied because I was effeminate and I was different. And so the bullied child often becomes the bully. And to this day, I carry shame and guilt for the cruel child that I became. There was a kid named Jeremiah, and he was fat. And I relentlessly teased him. I would pretend there was an earthquake when he would walk by. On Valentine's Day, another kid and me put like gross bananas and dirt inside an envelope for his Valentine, and I was just cruel to him. I wish I could find him and just say, I am so sorry. I am so sorry for humiliating you. But at the same time, I was being made fun of and bullied. So it's like if I became the bully and I was mean to other kids, then at least I was taking control of the situation and I was on the side of the bulliers and not the bullied. But I was suspended in third grade for bad behavior. I had to come home every single day with a sunshine report from my teacher. And the sunshine report, I love that it was called the sunshine report. The sunshine report had a list of things like cooperated with others, didn't talk out of turn, completed tasks, was kind or whatever. And of course, my sunshine report was always terrible, and I didn't want to show my mom. And one day, the school counselor lady, she would come in and talk with us. She had a little dolphin puppet, and I guess she was talking about emotions, or I don't even know what she was talking about. But she ended up pulling me into her little counselor room, and she just started asking me questions. You know, now as an adult looking back, I can see that this poor counselor saw an extremely tortured little boy, and she wanted to help me. So she sat me in there and she was just asking me questions. And then she asked about my mom and she asked about my dad. And she asked all these questions, and I just innocently was answering everything. And then later, I told my mom, and my mom said, "You are never to go back with that counselor. You are not to talk to her." So, you know, our home life, it was pretty bad. It really was. It was pretty bad. And I think that's why I became a bad kid, doing really bad things all the time. Um, so I would always sneak and play with girl things. I had a cousin, a male cousin who was a little bit older than me, and his sister, my cousin, she was my age. And so when I'd go over to their house, um, I'll call her Edith. Edith had so many Barbies. She had every single holiday Barbie. She had a massive collection of toys, girl things. And of course, she didn't judge me. We were best friends from the time I was tiny. So I would play Barbies with her, and I would sneak, and we'd go up into my grandmother's upstairs room, and there were drawers of like 1970s costume jewelry, and we just had so much fun. But when I'd get picked up, I'd always be in trouble because they would say, "You didn't even," I'll call him, let's call him Brandon. "You didn't even play with Brandon, did you? You only played with Edith." And so I was always in trouble, just constantly in trouble for acting like a girl and acting out. So third grade was rough. There was a little fat girl named Dawn, and I picked on Dawn. Um, I remember one time we were on the swings, and I was saying, "Dip back." You know how you dip back on the swings when you're swinging? And she had really long hair, so I was telling her to dip back so that her hair would get in the puddles underneath the swings. And she did, and I was in trouble. And I had to stay in at recess, and the teacher told me that I had to write an apology letter to Dawn. And I was just sitting there thinking, this is so stupid. So I wrote an apology letter to Dawn. I still have it because the teacher gave it to my mom. She did not give it to Dawn. And the letter said, "Dear Dawn, I'm sorry I was mean to you, but it's not my fault. Rochelle told me to do it. You have nice, clean teeth. I might play with you tomorrow, but don't be upset if I don't." So that was my fake apology to poor little Dawn, and the letter was just given to my mom. So I was just descending into this, like, really kind of awful child. At church, I spit on my primary teachers, and my neighbor, my best friend growing up, was a little girl. Through the fence, I discovered her through the hole in the fence, and we became good friends. And we have a legendary story together. We'll call it the Mary Poppins story. So we were up in her room, and we were jumping off of the bed with an umbrella, and we were believing that the umbrella was slowing us down. So me, being this horrible little brat, decided that, oh, it would be cool if we jump out of your window and do the umbrella out of your window. So we dragged a mattress out below the window and all these blankets and all these pillows. And she was up sitting in the windowsill. I was down on the ground saying, "Do it, do it." Because we had already tested the umbrella with a Barbie. And the umbrella slowed down the Barbie as far as we could tell. So, of course, it was going to slow her down. I really thought it was going to be like Mary Poppins and she would slow down. Well, my poor friend jumped out of the window, landed on the pillows, not on like the soft parts. She landed on the edge of everything, hurt her ankle, and I wasn't allowed to play with her anymore. I remember her father coming over, and he was with his daughter Jenny, and they were on the porch. And I knew I was in trouble, and my mom came out and he said, Ryan is no longer allowed to play with Jenny. And I think I said something like, I don't care, because I was this awful little brat. And so that didn't last very long. Jenny and I were best friends, still close to this day. I absolutely love her, and she was one of those non-judgmental little friends. She would let me play with her She-Ra dolls, and she'd give me Barbie heads. So I would take Barbie heads and put it on a popsicle stick and make a little dress so that I could hide them and play with them when I wanted to, because I wasn't allowed to play with Barbies. By the way, if you have a kid like I was, and you forbid them from ever playing with a certain type of toy, or you forbid them from ever eating an apple, they're going to grow up and love those things for the rest of their lives. I have to explain why I loved quote unquote girl things and not boy things. It can be summarized by me going to Target as a little kid. I was not a conflict. I hated army. I hated fighting. I hated hunting. I hated all of that stuff. So when you go down the boy aisle, it was all based in conflict. Batman's not smiling at you. Spider-Man is not smiling at you. Captain America is not smiling at you. WWF figurines are aggressive with their muscles. And then all the toys are based on like conflict. Even like Nerf squirt guns are still based in conflict. And my little heart wanted the opposite of conflict because I grew up in such a conflicted home. So what did the girl aisle offer? Every toy was about friendship. Barbie was going camping with her little sister. Those little bears, like they sell the little bear families for a dollhouse. They were happy families. Dad, mom, little kids getting along. Care Bears were about caring and love and security and happiness. My Little Ponies were about friendship, sparkle, magic, and yummy things to eat. And all of those toys represented the world that I wish I could live in. And conflict-based toys were just the opposite of what I wanted because I hated conflict. I was growing up in conflict. So that's why some little boys may gravitate toward girl things, because girls are lucky. All of their toys and the whole world that's presented to them as little kids is like princess, fun, Barbie, all of that. I remember as a kid, I had a cassette tape of the Little Mermaid soundtrack, and I was home alone with my dad, and I was playing the soundtrack to The Little Mermaid, and I was making up a dance to her song, Part of Your World. Who knows what I was doing? Pretending I was a mermaid. I don't know, making up my own little ballet dance. And I didn't know my dad was watching, and later I was in big, big trouble for that. Again, I think my dad just had a paranoia that he had a gay kid and he had to get rid of it. My dad was an anti-gay activist, and he broke my innocence by telling me way, way, way too much about the evil homosexuals. I think I was maybe 9, maybe 10, and he, in explicit detail, told me all of the alleged things that homosexuals do. I won't even repeat them here because it's so gross. Most of it was not true. And so I was presented with this idea that gays were so bad that it was just like the most evil people on the planet. And so I had no idea that my feelings were gay. I really had no idea. I mean, you're only 9, 10 years old. That's not what I was thinking about. But it just wasn't a possibility in my mind that I could ever be gay because gays are so evil that they're doing all of this stuff. And later my mom would fight with him and complain. She said, You know, the homosexuals have not done anything to us. The homosexuals have never hurt our family in any way. You're the one who brings all of that inappropriate conversation and nastiness into our home. And it's true. It's totally true. My dad was the most gregarious, handsome, generous, fun, like social butterfly, hardworking, all American guy. But he was also a total psycho when it came to raising me. He left us when I was 10, which was actually a blessing because the screaming and the fighting and the fear wasn't there anymore. I know in my heart my dad was bipolar. I know it. Every single characteristic and symptom of bipolar 1 is it's like my dad to a T. So I have more compassion for him as an adult, and I'll dive into my mental illness diagnoses and all of that later on. But I have more compassion for him because he was bipolar. For example, when he would come home from work, you know, we'd all look around and say, is it Dad A or is it Dad B? Because Dad A was so fun. You're on the farm, you're juicing apples from the apple orchard, you're riding horses, you're just having a wonderful time. And he had this alter ego. He put in fake teeth, and it was so funny. They were like these buck teeth, and he would play this character at like family events and make people laugh. So that was Dad A. Dad A was literally like the perfect dad, the perfect Mormon, the perfect just, oh, so much fun. Dad B was violent. Dad B was cruel. Dad B was doomsday. Dad B had this like cocked jaw of anger. And you just knew you avoid Dad B. You don't talk to Dad B. Dad B was my worst nightmare. I remember we owned a farm, and we were out of the farm where he kept our horses. And I did enjoy being around the horses. I loved to brush their hair. They were like a giant My Little Pony to me. But my dad did not want my interaction with the horses to be like that. So this is another one of those childhood experiences that marked me for life. We were in the horse corral, and my dad was always really mean to the horses. Well, Dad A was probably nice to the horses, but Dad B was cruel. He'd always like slap him in the face and yell, "Who's boss? Who's in charge? Who's in charge?" So we had one horse that was a little bit like jumpy and scary. I hated her because she was nervous. You know, she'd jerk her head and everything. So I didn't want to be around her, and I didn't want to ride her. And my dad put me on that horse in the corral and started to whip the horse with the heavy hook end of the guide rope, the lead rope. And the horse was jumping and bucking, and I was hysterically terrified, holding on for dear life while he was screaming, "Be a man! Be a man! Be a man!" as he whipped the horse. And I'm holding on for dear life, trying not to fall off of the horse. And that's just an example of what my father considered masculinity. And I was forced to go hunting. I absolutely hated hunting. One of my first experiences hunting was we were out shooting jackrabbits, and I shot a jackrabbit. And of course, my luck being what it was, the jackrabbit was not killed. It was flailing in the sagebrush, blood squirting everywhere, and it was screaming. If you didn't know this, jackrabbits scream. Like, I can't really describe it. It's just this piercing, agonizing sound. And so the jackrabbit was flailing and screaming. I dropped my gun, ran over to this injured animal, and I wanted to save it. And I was just hysterical because my little heart couldn't handle what I had done to this bunny. It was just a bunny to me. And it was flailing and it was in the sagebrush. And one of my nephews, who's close to my age, was told to smash it with the butt end of his gun and kill it. And he did. And I just ran back to the farmhouse, just hysterical from killing that bunny. And so I hate hunting. I hate it. Killing animals it's my worst nightmare. Jumping back a few years, I was about 5 years old, and one of my family members is a trapper. So, like traps, catching coyotes, badgers, I don't even know, where you set the traps and then you go check the traps. So, again, probably to toughen me up, probably to teach me what a man was, I was in the back of the pickup truck and we were checking the traps, and we came across a trap that had a coyote in it. And the coyote, his leg was in the trap, and he was screaming like a dog, like whimpering and screaming like a terrified dog, like a puppy. And I watched as my family member smashed they were trapping for the fur, and I watched him smash the coyote to death with a club. And I was in the back of the truck, and of course the dead body was put in the back of the truck. Um, I'm actually kind of speechless talking about that. I can't imagine taking a 5-year-old baby boy with me and going and doing that to a coyote. So, as you can tell, this forced masculinity that was imposed upon me as a kid, I'm obviously rebelling as an adult. And in later episodes, that rebellion will come through full force. But Lady Maga USA and drag itself, I really think, is a rebellion against these brutal, horrifying experiences of my childhood that were meant to make me masculine. So I've demonstrated my natural feeling toward animals. Last year, there was a squirrel in the middle of the road. I mean, this is 2024. Squirrel in the middle of the road. Somebody hit it in front of me. It was still alive. I pulled over and I tried to rescue this little sweet squirrel. He was like half paralyzed and writhing in pain. So I was out in the middle of traffic. I got something out of my car and I rescued this little squirrel. And by the time I got him to my car, he had already died. And I buried him. I had a funeral for him and like a prayer. I have kitties, and even to this day, I have a little tiny dwarf hamster, and I love animals. They're magical gifts from God, and I adore them. So this next story that I'm going to share is it is one of the most horrible experiences of my entire life, and I'll just share it. So by the time I was in 4th grade, I was at the point of being relentlessly bullied, faggot, queer, all of that stuff. I still had my school plays and I still got to perform, and I was in a performing group, Sunshine Generation. I loved it, but because of my performance endeavors, I was labeled fag, queer, all of that. So, 4th grade, things were pretty rough, and I hate to say this, but I've described that I became this nightmarish bully, out of control, fighting, suspended kid. And one of those one of those things that I became was mean to my pets. Um, Obviously, a kid who's mean to their pets is being aggressive because they feel empowered the way I was mean to kids. So I was mean to our dogs. And one day in the backyard, I was with our kitty and our little Shih Tzu dog. And apparently, according to me, the kitty was being mean to the Shih Tzu. And I took the kitty and I tossed her over the fence and thought that was that. I did not even think of or consider or remember that the neighbors had dogs. And immediately I heard the dogs run over to her, and I was over that fence in 1 second. And I took a 2x4 thing and I was hitting the dogs. But one dog had her by her head, and the other dog had her by her hindquarters. And no matter how hard I hit those dogs with that 2x4, they wouldn't let go. She jumped up at one point and almost got away, but the big dog jumped up and grabbed her, and I watched them kill her. I watched them kill her in front of me, and I had her body in my hands, and the Mormon missionaries were over at our house having dinner with us, and my mom came outside, and the Mormon missionaries came outside, and I was holding her, and my mom just screamed, "You killed her! You killed her!" And I did. It was my fault. Yes, it was accidental. Yes, I did not intend to kill the kitty, but I did. And now that I've shared my story about hunting and killing that rabbit, you can sort of understand what happened in my 10-year-old heart of what I had done. And I'll never fully get over that one. I'll never fully forgive myself. I've made up for it by adopting shelter kitties and giving all the love I can to every living creature. I don't even kill bugs. I catch them and I put them outside. So that hit me so hard that I didn't even know what to do except write a letter to the Mormon prophet. In the Mormon church, you have bishops and leaders and all this stuff. It goes all the way up to the prophet. The original prophet was Joseph Smith, and there's always been a living prophet. They believe that there's a living prophet on earth, the same as Moses or any other prophet, and their justification for that is that why would God leave us without a prophet now if they had prophets in the past? So as a Mormon family and as a Mormon boy, the prophet was the ultimate authority in my life and the ultimate person who basically knew everything and who could communicate with God. So I sat down and I wrote a letter. I wrote a letter to the prophet, and I told him what happened with my kitty. And I guess my mom mailed the letter. And he wrote me back, believe it or not. God bless his heart. He wrote me back. And he said, "Dear Ryan, I'm so sorry to hear about your kitty." And he essentially just told me that Heavenly Father loves me and that it was going to be okay. And so that sweet man, the Mormon prophet, wrote back I mean, we're talking millions of church members, right? I mean, who knows how many letters he got, but he wrote me back. And so that was a little bit of closure. But the experience with my kitty was such a betrayal of my heart and my soul that I I didn't get over it very quickly. I remember being at school and I told other kids about it, and they were sad and they said, it wasn't your fault. You tried to save her and all this stuff. But I remember just saying, you don't understand. You don't understand what I did. So the guilt of that was extreme. So the guilt of that, coupled with the guilt from previous experiences that I've talked about, reinforced in my little mind that I was evil. I don't really think that any 10-year-old child can be evil. I think they're a product of their environment, and I don't know. If I could just talk to that 10-year-old Ryan, I'd be like, hey, kid, you're not evil. So that was fourth grade, and that was a horrible, horrible time. The good news is, as fifth grade began, this is sort of when Ryan the Little Superstar came into being. Fifth grade was one of the best years of my entire life, and I owe it all to my music teacher. I auditioned I was in the regular choir. I was in all the school plays. I was in performing groups, and I auditioned for the show choir, which was like a dance performance choir that compiled all the best performers from all of the elementary schools in the zip code or whatever. And I made it, and I was in that choir. And by this time, I was fully bullied at school. I knew I was different. But I had a music teacher, and she was literally a saint. She knew I was this disturbed child who was very bratty and very rebellious, but she believed in me, and she made me feel so comfortable in my own skin. I mean, I got solos and I got to perform, and I just loved rehearsals, and I loved my little like bow tie outfit that I got to wear to perform. It was heaven on earth to me. We would perform around town, and we had our concerts and everything like that. And I'll never forget, after one of our concerts, I was mingling with my family and whoever after the show, and this lady came up to me and she looked at me and she said, I'll see you in the movies. And I just knew I was going to be a big star someday. Oh man, I loved those memories. I also had a great teacher. She was phenomenal. She'd have us memorize poetry, and I know she knew that I was smart, and she made me feel smart. And so this little window of time in my childhood, it was a break from all the things I had been through. I really came into my own skin. That's when I really solidified my love of performing and acting and dance and everything else. And it was a wonderful year. My mom came to all my performances. Looking back, I realized that none of my male family members ever came to my performances. They thought it was fag behavior, that I should not be in all these performances and plays and show choir, and they never came, but my mom supported me. And I know my mom just wanted to protect me by helping me not act like a girl, but she believed in me and she let me perform. I got to be there's an opera called Hansel and Gretel, and I auditioned and I got to be in the children's chorus, and it was so exciting and it was so fun. My favorite thing was being backstage in the makeup room, getting to wear makeup. It was so exciting. But my mom always let me perform. She knew that that was in my heart, that it's just a huge part of who I am. And she really fostered a feeling of belonging with my peers. She organized a Halloween party at our house, and everybody was invited, even the popular kids, and it was just going to be this great party. And I remember coming home from an audition, and I didn't get the solo that I wanted, and I was all upset. And my mom had already gone to the store, and she bought all of the decorations for the Halloween party. Well, I was already upset, and for some reason, I was just heartbroken and angry that I did not get to choose the Halloween decorations for my party. And my mom was at the sink, and she was doing the dishes, and I was just whining and complaining, and how could you go buy them without me? I wanted to choose the decorations. And my poor mom, she turned around, she grabbed a 6-pack of sarsaparilla root beers, and she smashed them on the floor in front of me, and the glass just went everywhere. And I just stood there for a second, and then I went upstairs. And looking back, this was shortly after my dad had left us, and my mom was trying to hold it together, and she was trying so hard to be a good mom and compensate for my lack of a father and balance this crazy, different child of hers. So I forgive her for smashing those sarsaparilla bottles. And now as an adult, dealing with life, the same way she did as an adult, I understand her frustration. So that Halloween party was kind of a game changer for me. It was so exciting to have everybody over. We did a scavenger hunt, and there's pictures of me with my little neighbor friend Jenny, and we're holding up a little mirror, both of us. It's a 2-sided mirror, and we're both like putting makeup on. I don't even know what my costume was, but we were so excited to be doing makeup. So my mom let me be who I was. She let me be in all those shows, and it was a magical time in my life. I feel like I've shared a lot of negative things, but I want to talk about what a phenomenal mother my mom was. Christmases every year at our house were, over the top, wonderful, magical. Santa at my house, he brought me a puppy, a trampoline. Christmas was just so special to my mom. I hate Christmas now. I don't know why. But as a kid, it truly was phenomenal. And my mom held things together the best she could. But my dad was still part of my life every now and then. I would be kind of forced to spend time with him. And we'd be up at 6 a.m. going to the church gym to practice basketball. I hated basketball. I played basketball at the YMCA because I knew that's what boys were supposed to do. My sister came to one of my games, and she said, "Ryan, you did really, really good, but you don't have to get rid of the ball as soon as somebody passes it to you." So obviously, when they would pass me the ball, I'd freak out and just get rid of it. I remember going the wrong way, like how they switched hoops or something, and I remember running the wrong way. I hated it. I remember he took me to my grandma's house one time, and he was making me watch football. I hate football. I don't understand it. I don't even know the rules. It's so stupid to me. But he was forcing me to watch football, and finally he let me just kind of wander off, and just went upstairs where my cousin had all of her Barbies and my grandma's costume jewelry, and I was just upstairs living my best life. And my dad, I think he fell asleep watching that football game. I will never like team sports. I hate them. So 5th grade was a nice break from otherwise very difficult childhood, but 6th grade did not treat me well. As I approached turning 12, sort of fell apart again. I I was on a road trip. I don't know where we were. Were we going to San Francisco or something? And I was with my cousin who's about 2 years older than me, and we were in the back seat. And we thought it would be hilarious to moon the other cars in traffic. Not with our bare butt, but with our underwear. Or maybe he dared me to do it. I don't even know. But I did it, and my parents were so upset. So when we got home, um, I was told that I was in trouble and that I was going to be whipped. Now, my other siblings had grown up being whipped with the belt, and my dad was a firm believer in whipping with the belt. So I was taken out to the barn on the side of our house, and I was told to pull down my pants. And my dad said, if you scream, I will continue more than 12. But if you don't scream, you're only going to get 12 whips. Now, the whips were obviously extremely painful. He wasn't holding back. He was hitting me as hard as he could. And I realize now, looking back, he didn't want me screaming because the neighbors would have heard. And that punishment sort of marked me. It wasn't so much about the whipping. It was having my pants down. It was just humiliating to me to have my pants down and to get whipped like that. And so let's go back to why my dad was so extremely harsh with me. I personally believe that my dad was gay. I really do. Straight men might be disgusted by homosexuals. They might be grossed out. They might not like them. But they're not consumed with hatred of them the way my dad was. His hatred and obsession with fighting the homosexuals was so deep and so all-consuming. And it's kind of like, methinks thou doth protest too much type of a situation. I've come to this conclusion on my own, and I believe that I am correct. And this knowledge helps me forgive him because he was from a completely different generation. He was born in the 1940s. So the idea of actually being able to express or talk about any sort of same-sex feelings was not even an option. And my personal belief is that he got my mom pregnant in high school on purpose, because what better proof to yourself and to the world that you're not gay than to get a girl pregnant? Oops, I'm the big man on campus. I got this gorgeous girl pregnant. We're getting married. And maybe in his own brain, he believed that he was moving on. So in my mom's later years before she died, I had a really, really awkward conversation with her. And I said, Mom, I want to ask you a few things that are going to be uncomfortable, but I believe Dad was gay and I want to know. So I asked her questions about their intimate life. And I said, what was, this and that? What was it like with him? And she said, even when I was young and skinny and beautiful, I always felt like he was disgusted by my body. And I said, okay, so what was intimacy like? Like, what was it like? She said, well, it felt like a duty. It felt impersonal, and it felt like it was just something that we did, and he needed to release and just, get it over with. And I was like, okay, this is confirming my belief. And then I asked her detailed questions about things that husbands and wives often do in heterosexual relationships. And I asked her about one thing. And I said, did you ever do this? Oh, no, never. Oh, gosh, no. Oh, no. red flag. Every other heterosexual couple I know would have done these things. Then I asked her about another thing. Did you ever do that? Or did he ever do this? Oh, no, never, no. Oh my gosh, no, never. So basically, my mom was never worshipped or ravished or explored the way a wife deserves to be treated. And she told me he just had a disgust for her body. Now, a man like him who spent his life, fighting the homosexuals, talking about the homosexuals, either he was gay or perhaps he had been abused by a man when he was younger. I have no idea. Now, I'm not saying that my opinion is fact, but I am saying that it explains a lot of why I was treated with such contempt and violence and all of this as a little effeminate kid. And I think maybe it was my dad's way of saving me, because he viewed that if I went into that lifestyle, I would be dead of AIDS. We had a family friend who had AIDS, and my dad worked with his mom, and my mom was a nurse, so this guy would call us all the time. And before he died, he was just kind of like delirious and losing his cognitive abilities. And my dad was always very kind to him. My whole family was. My mom would always take his phone calls. So maybe my dad was trying to save me from the fate of this man of ending up with AIDS and dying. And to this day, I have a visceral fear of getting a disease. And I'm grateful for that, because I've never been promiscuous. But I think talking about this theory about my dad explains so much. And it helps me forgive him and have compassion in my heart if he was in fact tormented and conflicted on the inside. I mean, there has to be an explanation for this. I know, well, I don't know for a fact, I don't have proof, but I believe and I know in my heart that my dad was bipolar. There's no other explanation. So he wasn't medicated for bipolar. One day he would be like riding horses and shouting freedom in the mountains and gregarious and happy. And then he would go stay in the basement of his office building for like 3 to 4 days. And he called it the pit. Obviously he was suffering. Obviously he was miserable. Obviously he was in such a crippled, dark place that he had to stay down in that basement until he could face the world again. So I have compassion for my dad. And I've just chosen to focus on all the positive things that he taught me. He taught me patriotism. He taught me social skills. He was so great as a scout leader. I have the best memories at scout camp in California. And he just worked so hard as a mentor for the youth. And he was absolutely great. So I choose to focus on Dad A. And I refuse to ruminate and dwell on all of his shortcomings and his abusive tendencies, because it doesn't serve me. And I believe he's in heaven. And I believe he has faced all his mistakes, and God has mercifully and patiently guided him through an understanding of the wrongs that he did. And I think he's moved on, and I think he is a spiritual being in heaven. And when I see him, it's going to be a joyful reunion. So let's get back to 6th grade. Oh gosh, this is when I started to get fat. I was never super fat, but in my mind, I was obese. To this day, I have body dysmorphia, and I've overcome a lot of mental illness, but I never want to get rid of body dysmorphia because it keeps me thin. But 6th grade, my mom always called it prepubescent pudge. And for somebody like me who's going to grow up to be 6 foot tall, I think it's kind of normal for 11, 12-year-old boys to kind of get a little chubby and get get softer. My poor mom, she was just trying to make me feel better about myself, but one time she said, Ryan, you're not fat, you're just soft. Nothing could have been worse in my brain than hearing I was not fat, I was just soft. So my self esteem took a plummet as I entered sixth grade. I was still a tormented kid. The bullying at this point was at an all time high. I mean, the kids were relentless. Faggot, fairy, Rihanna. They'd call me Rihanna instead of Ryan. Rihanna is actually the first drag name I ever used, trying to turn that around and own it. But I hated going to school. At the beginning of the school year, I had one teacher, and I just didn't like him. He hated me, and we didn't get along, so I got transferred to another class. And that teacher didn't want me in his class either. I remember spending 2 weeks. My desk was put in the hallway outside of the door for 2 weeks, and I was in huge trouble. I don't even know what I was doing, but I didn't do so well. And I remember a girl in my little desk group. You know how you have the desks all put together in a little group of four, and she used to call me Rihanna, and I would say, "Stop calling me Rihanna." So I raise my hand and say, "Mr. Smith, Kelsey's calling me Rihanna again." And he'd say, "Knock it off, stop calling him Rihanna." And then she would look at me and she would just mouth the word, Rihanna, Rihanna. So I was tormented. I hated school. I hated myself. School pictures came around and I did this stupid weird hairdo with my bangs like sticking straight up. I thought it was cool. But my teacher said, "Why did you do that with your hair? That's what girls do." And so it really just sort of became obvious to me that I was a total misfit and totally different. And it was a horrible year of my life. There were these kids named Will and Wendy, and I walked to and from school, and they took it upon themselves to get their gang of kids on bikes to torment me and to make fun of me and, pull up on their bike and say, "You queer, you faggot, you fairy." And so my friend, Jenny, who I would walk to and from school with, she stopped walking with me because obviously I was a target. I remember one time they were following me with their bikes, taunting me, and I just sprinted and I ran as fast as I could to a friend's house. He lived in an apartment complex, and he let me in his apartment, and all the kids were waiting outside on their bikes. And he was scared, and he told me, "You can't stay here. You can't stay here." I was like, "Please let me stay here till they go away." Well, they weren't going away. So he let me out the back door, and I just ran home. And I just lived with this terrible fear of these bully kids. Probably karma because I was such a bully too. But they made my life a living hell. And one time they had eggs and they smashed eggs on my head as I was walking home from school. And of course, having eggs smashed on your head is rather traumatizing. Nobody wants to have that. And so after the bullying got to such a serious level, it was time to go to middle school. And the middle school that I was zoned for was filled with all those kids who were threatening to kick my ass, beat me up, beat the shit out of me once I got to 7th grade in middle school. And I truly didn't know what to do. And this is where my angelic mom stepped in. And she arranged for me to get a variance to another middle school, a little further away than the one I was zoned for. but she was able to secure a variance so that I would go to that school where the kids in my neighborhood and the bullies would not be able to find me or follow me. So I got a variance to another junior high. Fortunately, this other junior high had a wonderful musical theater program, and I'm actually going to end here with this episode. We'll pick up in junior high. So I've taken you all the way from birth to sixth grade. And like I said, I've always been a creator. As Lady Maga USA, I've recorded 4 pop songs. I've always written songs. So I want to leave you with the first song that I ever wrote on the piano. I think I was maybe 8 or 9 when I wrote this song, and I was so proud of it. I recorded it into a little tape recorder, and I have an uncle who's a musician, and I asked him if he could help me get it on the radio, and I was calling radio stations asking them to play my song, and of course they thought it was cute. Never made it on the radio, and I did not play piano at that point. I took lessons for a long time, but I was a brat and I hated practicing, so I couldn't really play. But anyway, this is the first song I ever wrote, and I think it's pretty darn great. It's repetitive, and it has about 3 notes in it, but I'm still proud of it, and hopefully this song will be immortalized. I've been watching you down every street of town, into every store, out of every store, into parking lots, even into your house. Baby, you caught my eye. I've been watching you have that strife with that guy on Saturday night. He's interrupted your life. Why don't you invite yourself into mine? I have got a nice Ferrari and it's really hot and sparkly, and I think you'd be more happy with me. I get straight A's in school and I know what is cool, and I know you'd be more happy with me. I think you're cute and that other guy's a stooge, and you have to admit that to me. I want to go out and there is no doubt. I just hope you want to go out with me.